Hello, my name's Simon Wardley. I'm going to talk to you about crossing the river by feeling the stones. A bit of background about myself. I've built or been the CEO or on the board of 4 startups, all of them sold to large US players. These days I work for multiple governments. They fund me to research into what I find interesting. So I spend most of my life traveling the world. I live in a marsh, and I'm very fortunate. But I'm going to talk to you about strategy, unfortunately. I'm going to take you back in time to 2003. I was CEO of this company. We'd been bought by Canon. It was an online photo service, several million users, about 10 million in total, very profitable. Revenue growing, everything was good, except for one thing. I was the CEO. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I wasn't like the chess-playing master you read about. I was the alchemist. I was making it up. It was all gut feel. It was all whatever was popular in the HBR. Now, we had vision statements. This is from 2003. Our strategy is customer-focused. We will lead an innovative effort of the market through our use of agile techniques and open source, blah, blah, blah. But I basically pinched it from other people and just sort of rammed it together. So I started going around listening to other CEOs speaking and recording what I like to call the words they were using, the business level abstractions of a healthy strategy, or small words. And I do this every couple of years just for fun. And this was 2014. These are the common blahs that people were talking about. Digital business, big data, disruptive, innovative, collaborative, competitive advantage, ecosystem, open source, blah, blah, blah. And then what I do is I grab people's strategy documents, put them together, create a blah template. Our strategy is blah. We will lead a blah effort of the market through our use of blah and blah to build a blah. And then I ram together the blahs and the blah templates and auto-generate 64 random gibberish strategies. I thought I'd go through them. Number 1, our strategy is customer focused. We will lead a disruptive effort of the market through our use of innovative social media and big data to build a collaborative cloud-based ecosystem. Number 2, our strategy is innovative digital business. We will lead a growth effort of the market through our use of customer. I can barely say the words. Well, it's all gibberish. So a friend of mine's put this online, by the way, if anybody ever wants to use this, because I sent these around, and I got about 400 responses last time. One was, this is the exact wording from our business plan. 2, I've seen 2 of these used already, and 3 was, are you for hire? Which I'm not, by the way. So a friend of mine's put this online. This is strategy as a service. So if you ever need a strategy, just type in the URL. It will randomly generate you one based upon nothing whatsoever. Our strategy is collaborative. We will lead an open effort. And if you don't like it, just press refresh. You'll eventually find something. So there I was, 2004, CEO of this company. I knew I didn't know what I was talking about. I assumed everybody else did. But I was the fake CEO. I was sort of panicking. I went back through various books from history. I started reading Sun Tzu. Do you know what he wrote? Art of War. Fantastic. So he talked about 5 factors that mattered in competition. The first one is purpose, moral imperative. You know, you'll have a mission, a vision of where you wish to go. I want to be the best tea shop in Ashford, say. Landscape is the second one. Understand the environment you're competing in. The third one is climactic patterns, so understand how that environment is changing. Then you get into doctrine, universal principles of operation, and finally leadership, which is all the context-specific gameplay. And then I came across John Boyd. Anybody heard of John Boyd? He created OODA loops, US Air Force. It's how they design fighter planes. And so what he talks about is the game, so understand your purpose again, observe the environment, so that's landscape and climate, and then orientate around it, that's with doctrine, and then you're into the decision bit, and then you're into acting. And so I used to share this with people, and they go, oh, well, you know, strategy is all about the importance of why. And I thought, well, that's true, but there are 2 whys. There's the why of purpose, like I want to be the best tea shop in Ashford, but there's also the why of movement. as in why do I make this move over that move? So if you think of a game of chess, the why of purpose may be to win. The why of movement is which move do you make? And it's through moving that we actually learn. So going back to for Tango, I looked at our purpose. Well, we had 16 lines of business, so it was all a bit of a mess. I was the CEO. And then I looked at the landscape. How did we observe the environment? And this brought me onto a subject known as situational awareness. And I'm going to explain it with 3 examples: Vikings, chess, and Themistocles. So Vikings, very frightening people. This is how they used to navigate. From Herman Head due west towards Hearth, and you will have sailed north of Hatland, so that you just glimpse it. And basically, it means this. Our maps we often use stories for navigation. You've probably done it yourself. When somebody asks you directions, if they have a map, you point out. If they don't, you give them a story. Up the road, turn left, turn right, at the roundabout, second left, and off they drive. And then you're left with that moment. Did I send them in the right direction? That sort of thing. Maybe because you're evil or something, I don't know. But Vikings used to navigate with stories. They used to learn epics, 15 years of epics before they were allowed to sail ships. But that's really all the story means. So quick question, what would you use to navigate? Visual map or a verbal story? Map, yes? Good, excellent. What do we use in business? Stories, right, super. Right, so the next example is chess world. So I want you to imagine you live in a world where everybody plays chess, no one's seen the board, all you've seen are these characters on a screen. You play the game very simply, you press a button, your opponent sees what you've pressed, you counter, they counter it, you counter, and it goes on for ages until somebody wins or it's a draw. Now what will happen is we'll take these sequences and stick them into our big data systems and come up with magic secrets of success. So if you press bishop, I should respond, I don't know, with pawn, pawn, queen. And we'll write books about this, so you know, the secret of the pawn. If you don't believe me, this is HBR November 2011, How Earlobes Can Signify Leadership Potential, a phrenology of management. So anyway, one day you'll play a game of chess against somebody and they will see something truly magical, the board. You won't know this. You've been doing this game for 20 years, and you will move and they will counter, and you will move and they will counter, and you will have lost. And you'll be there going, what the fiddlesticks happened there? The first thing you'll do is write down the sequence as a magic secret, and you'll still lose. And then you'll start going, well, maybe it's the speed at which they press the button, you'll still lose. Then you'll go, it's cultural, maybe they're a happy sort of person, you'll still lose. You'll lose because they exist in a high and you exist in a low level in situational awareness environment. So quick question, what would you use to learn? Secrets of success or context-specific play? Right, context-specific play, fantastic. Okay, what do you use in business? Right, okay, so the next one is Themistocles, ancient politician, Greek general, had a problem. Persians were invading. And what he decided to do was block off the streets of Artemisia and force the Persians along the coastal road into Thermopylae, narrow pass, small number of troops defend against a large force. Roughly 170,000 Persians, 4,000 Greeks, including 300 Spartans. Great. So I want you to imagine you're part of the Athenian army. It's so part of the Greek states. It's the eve of battle. Themistocles is giving you purpose, a moral imperative about how to defend against the invading Persian horde. But he says to you, I do not understand the landscape. I do not understand the environment. I have no map, but have no fear, for I have created a SWOT diagram. Strength to well-trained Spartan army, a high level of motivation not to become a Persian slave. Weaknesses, the E4s might stop the Spartans turning up. A truckload of Persians are turning up. Opportunities, get rid of the Persians. Get rid of the Spartans. We're Athenian. We hate the Spartans. And Persians, get rid of us. And the oracle says, really dodgy film might be produced a few thousand years later. Okay, what would you use to communicate and determine strategy in battle? Position of movement on a map or a magic framework like a SWOT? Position of movement. Okay, and you know what's coming. What do we use in business? It's what? Yes. So if I go back to Alchemy and chess, navigation, learning, and strategy, then in chess, it's all visual, it's all context-specific, it's all about position and movement. It's a high-level situational awareness environment. It's a bit like the military. If you ask a general why did they bombard a hill, they won't say because 67% of other generals are bombing hills, or they read an article in General Weekly that bombing hills is the new thing, or that it would make a good story, or that's what Uber would do. It's all about position and movement, where, and why here, over there. Alchemy is all about storytelling, secrets of success, magic frameworks. It's a low-level situational awareness environment, and that's where I was as this fake CEO living in that environment. And the difference between the two is not that I was, I hope to think it wasn't because I was daft. It's because I had no maps. And maps have very, very specific characteristics. They're visual, context-specific. They have position of pieces relative to an anchor, and you have movement. It doesn't matter whether it's a geographical map or a London Underground or even a chessboard. The problem is everything which I had in business, which we called a map, business process maps, mind maps, network topologies, none of them were actually maps. They didn't have those characteristics, so they were fairly useless from the point of view of learning. So I started off going, right, there I was, 2004, I better somehow, because everybody else knows how to map, and I'm the only CEO in the world who doesn't know how to do this, because I hadn't done an MBA. I now teach at various schools. I started off, right, I need an anchor. So I started off with the user, what's their need. Then I created a value chain, and that gave me position of components relative to the user. And then I needed movement, and I used an evolution axis. So when things appear, you get the genesis of something, then custom-built examples, eventually over time, products and rental services, and commodity utility. So I had a map. Wow. So why does that matter? Well, if I understand the landscape, I can start to learn climactic patterns. These are the rules that influence the game. So the first thing you learn is that your map is evolving. Everything evolves if there is supply and demand competition. The second thing you learn is that as everything evolves, its characteristics change. Doesn't matter whether it's money, computing, penicillin, it starts in this uncharted space and over time becomes industrialized. So it goes from the sort of the chaotic, the uncertain, the unknown to being boring, ordered, standard, predictable. The next thing you learn is that as things evolve, they enable new higher order systems to appear. They expand the adjacent possible. So electricity enables television, lighting, radio, and all this sort of stuff. And the next thing you learn is that the change isn't linear. So what happens when we shift from, say, product to utility, we get an exponential process of change. It's called a punctuated equilibrium. And the next thing you learn is you've got inertia to change, usually because of past success, so we don't like it. There's about 16 different forms of inertia. And there are about 27 common economic patterns in total. Now, inertia is an interesting one. Blockbuster, Netflix, who was first with a website? Blockbuster, yeah, who was first with video ordering online? Blockbuster, yeah, who was first experimenting with video streaming? Blockbuster, yay, who went bankrupt first? Right, so the problem with Blockbuster Netflix is it wasn't lack of innovation that killed Blockbuster. Do you know what it was? Bricks and mortar. And what was it about bricks and mortar? It was late fees. It was inertia created by their pre-existing business model based upon late fees. So if you have patterns, you can start to anticipate. So I could take my business in 2005. I knew platform compute was evolving. I knew we'd have inertia. I knew it would enable higher order systems. And this gives me multiple opportunities of where to invest. Do I attack that space? Do I build the world's first ever utility compute? Or do I try and differentiate on my online photo service? And around the board, we could now actually have a discussion about how we were going to attack the space. Now, of course, then Amazon launched, and that was 2006, and people were running around going, this cloud is just for startups, because we had all this weak signal stuff as well, and we had all these patterns, we were able to say, no, it'll dominate in 10 to 15 years, to which everybody sort of like burn him heretic and all that sort of stuff, and that's just inertia coming out. Once you've understood the landscape and the climatic patterns that you can anticipate, then you get on to orientating with doctrine. So these are the universally applicable principles. This is the stopping self-harm type stuff. So the first thing is you focus on user needs, pretty basic. Second thing, if you've got multiple lines of business, so in government like borders, immigration, police, we can share maps and identify common components and remove duplication and waste. Pretty straightforward. By the way, everybody thinks government is bad at waste. The worst example of government I've got is 118 workflow systems doing the same thing. I've got a bank with 1,000 risk management systems all doing the same thing. I mean, they complain they can't innovate, but they're brilliant at building the wheel in slightly different shades of blue. But anyway. The next thing you discover is you use appropriate methods, so you outsource Six Sigma, off-the-shelf products, build in-house agile techniques, rather than doing these sort of outsource everything projects, always ends in a disaster. HS2 has been doing some really interesting stuff in that space. Then you think small. This comes from FIST, the US Air Force, fast and inexpensive, simple and tiny, break things into components. You organize small, so Amazon 2 pizza model, higher cell-based structure, and then you get really advanced and you start to discover there's no such thing as one culture in an organization. You start having pioneers, settlers, town planners. And for more on that, GCHQ has very kindly open sourced this document called Boiling Frogs, which tells you how to organize and structure yourself around constant change. Well worth a read. So finally, after we understand our purpose landscape, we can start doing anticipation, and then we get into orientating and stopping self-harm. Then we get into the leadership bit, finally. And this is all about context-specific forms of gameplay. So you have a map, you can anticipate where things are going, you can see where to invest. It now is a question of why invest here over there. And it turns out you can manipulate the market. There's about 70 different ways of doing so. You can use open approaches to accelerate things. You can use fear, uncertainty, and doubt to slow it down. Use constraints. There's all sorts of games you can play. And then you act. So the first time I used this, we built the world's first serverless environment. It's big these days. This was 2006. Unfortunately, though it was rapidly growing, we had some American consultants explained to the parent company that the three things that we were doing, cloud, 3D printing, mobile phones as cameras, weren't the future. The future was 3D television. So that was a bit of a disaster. Then I went to a company called Ubuntu. I ran strategy for them. We were about 2% of the operating system market, 300 of us, the Spartans, against Windows and Red Hat. 18 months, it cost me $500,000. We took 70% of cloud computing. Then I started working with various governments, wrote something called the Better for Less paper for the coalition, helped the transformation of IT and government. These days, I do lots of stuff at nation-state competition. So this is actually a map of self-driving car. It's going forward into 2025. It's one of those interesting things where, you know, we all know it's all self-driving cars. It's all going to be digital subscription. You're going to have gold, platinum, whatever level membership. The other cars will get out of the way if you're platinum. Or if a platinum is heading towards the silver will crash into the wall and the platinum will get, you know, that sort of thing. Of course, this impacts with, you know, DVLA licensing of people. But what's interesting is the gameplay and who will actually, the Chinese players are very good at this. Anyway, quick summary. Strategy is a cycle. It's not a linear path. So it's really important to, you know, you constantly, as you move around the cycle, get better and better at the game. It's really important to obviously act, move, make small steps, and really useful to observe the environment as you do so. And that's where this whole sort of feeling, crossing the river by feeling the stones, Deng Xiaoping's idea comes from. It's like the economy. You have a direction, a purpose, but you have to adapt along the path. Now, retail. Ooh. So many years ago, somebody asked me, how would you attack the retail industry? Because I've been doing this for 12 years. And so I spent a morning, scribbled out a map and looked at points to attack. And I'd sort of forgotten about it until this happened. Anybody know what this is? Amazon Dash. I think Amazon Dash is brilliant. I see it as a field test for what is to come next. So I have no idea what Amazon is actually going to do. They will keep their plays secret to them, but I'll explain from my perspective. So this is Kate Stone. I used to do a lot of work in printed electronics. I helped create a book, a paper book, which had printed electronics inside it. So it's like a paper book, but you touch words and it interacts with stuff. And this is an example of a printed electronic poster. So you can print transistors and batteries now. There's all sorts of electronic circuitry which you can actually print. It's great fun. So this is a poster which actually makes sound when you touch things. All those companies who ran around, it's quite interesting being here, getting rid of their sort of printing presses and thinking they're not the future, are about to discover that they've sold off the Intels of the future rather cheaply. Anyway, so the interesting thing about printed electronics, and when you look at something like Amazon Dash, is eventually you're going to see something along this line. This is why I call it a field test. So where a label actually is printed dash bung. And why is that interesting? Well, that's interesting because what that does is turn the entire world into a supermarket shelf. Suddenly, if I'm like, oh gosh, I really like this clicker, just tap the label on the back, one's on the way home. Or if I go, I really like your jacket, sir, do you mind if I just touch a label, one's on the way home. Suddenly the entire world and everything around you and posters, they get everywhere. That is the supermarket shelf. And that's great. And these sorts of changes, we're probably about 5 years away, or maybe if they are working on it, maybe a bit closer to that happening, but eventually that concept of shelves will become more commodity-like. You'll see the exponential change. It'll take 5 to 10 years to get 3% of the market, and the further 5 years we'll get to 50%, and we'll have inertia because many of us make money from product placement on shelves. So we'll have inertia to this change, which is fabulous. So when you tell people that's all going, they'll go burn him, heretic, and all the rest of it until it's so obvious that it's all gone. So pretty much what happened with Blockbuster. It was their business model, not the lack of innovation in the organization that killed them off. It was their pre-existing business model. So in that case, it was late fees. What I'm saying is many in the retail, probably because of product placement, I imagine you all make quite a bit of money from that sort of stuff, and the ownership of shelves, that is your weak spot. Certainly the bit that I would attack. And yes, so eventually having shelves, not a good idea. And you lose an empire all because of a button. Now, Amazon is really good at various of these games. It runs, it never admits how it actually plays it. There's a beautiful model. I'm saying it's a beautiful model. I shouldn't really. I wrote it. That's a bit, but it's a model I like. There's a model called ILC, Innovate, Leverage, Commoditize. I wrote about this back in 2005, so 12 years ago. It's very simple. You take an existing product, you turn it into a utility, and everybody else builds on top of you. And then you don't look at their data, you mine the metadata to identify new patterns, which you then commoditize to component services. Of course, some of those people in that industry will moan, they've eaten my business model, and everybody else will cheer because you're now providing component services for everyone. But the point about this model is you can actually make the apparent rate of innovation for a company and customer focus and efficiency all accelerate with the size of the ecosystem, not the physical size of the company. And that's why going up against Amazon, when you look at Amazon, you think, oh, they're 300,000 or whatever they are people. They're vastly bigger than that because they've got a huge free research and development department building on top of them. Anyway, that's how I would have attacked the retail space. In terms of mapping, I made this all Creative Commons long ago. So if anybody wants to learn about mapping, there's about 450, 500 pages. You can just read and learn yourself how to do it. Occasionally I do conferences on this stuff. I tweet, I'm coming to London. Within 2 hours, 100 people had got together, built an entire conference, hired a hall, blah. So I was coming to London just to sit in a pub and help some people. Now I've got an entire conference. And we also, the company I work for, very kindly, they've created some videos. It takes about 2 weeks to learn. It's like £50 or something. But if you want to learn yourself, you can do so there. And that's me on the dot. Thank you very much.